Okay, well, let me introduce you to our fabulous speaker, you guys. So Chris Heimerl is our featured speaker tonight. And in addition to being a really warm person who genuinely wants kids and parents to succeed together, Chris holds a master's degree in social welfare and has done extensive postgraduate training in family therapy and substance abuse. He has over 45 years of experience. I don't know how, you're too young, Chris, primarily in the area of intellectual and developmental disabilities and mental health. He's also a dad of a child with a variety of complex and challenging developmental needs. And his first child, Nicholas, was born in 1980 and died shortly before his 7th birthday. Chris is now a proud papa to Nico, Isla, and Zoe, his sweet grandbabies, which is a huge blessing because he gets to spend time with them since he recently retired as the Positive Approaches Consultant for the state of New Mexico. And in that role, he guided in the transition of individuals from institutional to community-based settings. We love that. He's been featured presenter in over 300 conferences and workshops in 30 states. And now he's with us. Yes, can you believe it? So stay tuned after the presentation. I told you I have some extra special things to share with you. And without further ado, Chris Heimerl, everybody.
Hopefully that'll hold them all here till the end.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really, really pleased to be here. I've essentially been homebound since November. I was hit by a truck riding my bike, and after some time in a trauma center, I was home, and by the time I started to recover a little bit, the COVID was in place. So having something to do and some people to talk to, other than my 3 grandchildren, is just fabulous. So I do want to point out or piggyback on what Michelle said. I'm here more as a parent tonight, and I want to talk to you as a parent to other parents, in that there are things that I will support and recommend for parents that I would never tolerate anyone else on the planet doing, aside maybe from grandparents. That there is something about that relationship and those relationships that changes that dynamic just enough for me that there are things that are allowable. And so I'm coming tonight from that perspective as a parent of a child with some extraordinary needs. And as Michelle said, of course, our son, Nicholas, ended up succumbing to the physical disability aspect of his issues a long time ago. And of course, now we have little Nico, who is his namesake, who, by the way, reminds us a lot of him. If you can go to that slide just for a second for me, Michelle, and I'll show them the picture of the 3 little ragamuffins. Also, because I somewhat am hesitant to describe myself as a behavioral expert, it's just that I'm really, really curious about it. About behavior, and have been since the time I was a small child, wondering about what people are doing and why they were doing it. And I've been fascinated by watching people do things. And I, for example, I like watching people do things that do them well, whether they like it or not. I like watching things. So I've always been curious about motivation and what prompts people to choose this way or choose that way, and then act upon that. If you were to talk to my family or close friends, they would say that I am a far cry from a behaviorist, that a misbehaviorist would be a much more appropriate description of me. The other reason, that, by the way, that's Nico and Isla, our daughter's 3-year-old, 1-year-old, and then the little gal in pink is Zoe, our son's, and his wife Amy's a little girl. The other reason I'm pleased is because it compelled me to go find out a lot more about chromosome 18. I don't recall specifically ever running across it in my career, to be honest with you, which makes me think that I probably have and didn't know it. And it may be that the parent and the child were not aware, because of the variety of ways that it can be presented, that don't seem, I mean, some don't seem to have much in common at all, and could be easily mistaken. And one of the reasons that I'm glad that I did all of that looking at and learning more about it was one single line. And as I told Neil and Michelle in one of our early conversations, there was a line somewhere about that simply said, "We are here to catch you." And that took my breath away. It so resonates with what my experience as a parent was, feeling as though I was in free fall a lot of the time, and yet appearing to have it together. It's just that I didn't have my feet on the ground. And to know that there was someone there who said their mission was to catch me, again, just resonated. So it was the thing that really motivated me to want to be a part of and do, something with your organization. So whoever came up with that, I'm grateful for it, because it has stayed with me. Next slide, please. And then I have a poem that I wish to share to begin. This is from William Stafford, and it's called The Way It Is. There's a thread you follow, and it goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you're pursuing, and you have to explain about the thread, but it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen. People suffer, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You never let go of the thread. For over 45 years, I've been following a very singular thread, and it simply is, there must be a better way. I have been very fortunate in my career to have followed the arc of a lot of the technology around behavior. So there are times when people will say, well, did you ever study the work of Johnny Mattson? No, I was trained by Johnny Mattson. Did you ever study the work of Fox and Azrin? No, I was trained by them. How about the godfather of them all, Ivar Lovaas? Did you study his work? No, I was trained by him. Each time I have had the opportunity to pursue what was presented as the state-of-the-art, evidence-based, best practice, as soon as I thought I had my hands around it, I began immediately to think there must be a better way. And 5 years from now, I'm going to look back at today and say, I was wrong, that there has been. So I followed that arc through gentle teaching. I was their first nationally certified gentle teaching person, other than the folks in Nebraska. I was one of the founding members of the Positive Approaches Institute in Pennsylvania, that sort of launched this difference between positive behavior support and positive approaches, which is a much bigger umbrella. And I would say that today, I'm still looking for that next better way. And better way to what? And for me, it's not a better way to make people do what I want them to do. It's a better way of understanding, why do people do what they do? And what drives that, what motivates it, what turns it on, what turns it off, and then what role may I or others in this child, or in the case of the adult, take that would then have an impact on their experience of the world. And that experience of the world would be different enough that they would begin to develop a different repertoire of behavior in response to that. So at this point, after 45 years, I would have to say I'm probably best described as a behavioral agnostic. That I have seen an awful lot of, here is the Holy Grail, and then it turned out not to be. There was a better way. We did, as we kept doing more research, as we kept pressing forward. My research has largely been single subject, one person at a time. How do we figure this out? And as Michelle mentioned, they brought me into New Mexico for that purpose, to close their 2 state institutions, which now I've had an opportunity to do in 3 states, to be a part of the closure of all of their state-run facilities. Vermont, which actually led to me being in New Mexico in a very roundabout way. New Mexico, obviously, and then the state of Michigan brought me in for about a 3 or 4 year period to help figure out the last 64 people in that state who were institutionalized, and then we closed the final facility in Michigan about 3 years ago, I guess that was. So each person has taught me a different and unique and novel way of trying to understand what makes a difference in people that are prone to act in very provocative or outrageous or hurtful and sometimes lethal ways. We support everyone in the community in New Mexico. So what I'm giving you tonight as my 6 essential skills have been whittled down from, I don't know, 6 million essential skills, I guess, something like that I want to share with you tonight. But they'll change. I hope I know more 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Can I have the next slide, please? And by the way, this is all still kind of setting stage, introductory sort of stuff. Very many people and some of the applied behavioral analysis or analytics people will still refer to this model of learning theory, this hypothesis that there are antecedents, the A's. There are conditions occurring around the person that are environmentally based, are interpersonally generated, but then there's also the intrapersonal stuff, that people dealing with a particular not feeling well or a distress or a memory. All kinds of things can serve as an antecedent. Now some people will use an antecedent as a description of a trigger that triggers a behavior. I don't follow that line of thought for a couple of reasons. Primarily is because what we have learned over a long period of time and by observation, and now has been confirmed by the neurosciences, is that this hypothesis is horribly flawed and incomplete. What we now know with regard to how our brains work is it's not the antecedents. It is not those events or those conditions which trigger behavior. It is our emotional response to those events that then lead to behavior. And through PET scans and fMRIs and all kinds of things that show where our brain is being active, we know very, very clearly that cycle. It's sensation, it's emotional kind of temperature taking and response, then it's cognition after the emotional part, then it's behavior that emerges out of that confluence of sensation and emotion and cognition. And by the way, as most of us have experienced, is the more emotional temperature there is, the less cognition we have. It's just like a teeter-totter. As we get more aroused, our ability to make sense and to think clearly is further and further impaired. And then you think 5 minutes later, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that. Yeah, that's because you were in a different mental state now. Your emotional arousal is back down. So what I prescribe or ascribe to is, rather than spending a whole lot of time figuring out specific events that we believe lead to behavior, I want to know what types of events lead to distressing emotion. What are the things that send this person over the edge, make them feel tremendously anxious or afraid or ashamed or whatever that might be? And to some extent, I'm also concerned about what really sends people into giddy world. It may be a very positive experience and emotion, but I also know they might be very, very vulnerable right now to sort of losing it and crossing a threshold that excitement and anxiety neurologically and physiologically aren't very different. It's that little cognition piece that changes our assessment of what's going on. So I'm very interested in a piece that's missing from this equation between the A and the B, which would be, F for feelings or E for emotion. But that said, we make choices, and the B obviously is behavior. What is the thing of concern? That if we wish to increase it, what do we do? If we wish to diminish it or eliminate it, what is it that we do? And then the C are consequences. What happens after this behavior is exhibited? Oops, I just lost. Was that me? I don't know if I'm still on. Michelle?
We can still see you. We can still see you, and we can still see the presentation. Can you see the? Can you see the slideshow?
No, my thing is just. I don't know. Oh, I think somebody just tried to call me, and it threw things off. So I lost the video. I still have you, Michelle, and I have you, Emily, but I don't have the slideshow, which is
okay.
Fine.
You know what? I'm going to stop the share and restart it and see if that fixes the problem.
Oh, okay. Can I keep talking?
Sure. Oh, I think you can handle that, Chris.
All right.
Now can you see it? Now
Nope.
Can you see it?
No, it just says Zoom.
Okay, so you see, but you see Emily and I?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. The only other thing we could try is you can go out and come back in, perhaps. I don't.
No, I'll just keep going. And I'll kind of keep track of where I am in the,
You said you've got your iPad there with your slideshow on it, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So the C's, it generally has been described as that's our world, in that we want to control the consequences that follow pretty immediately after behavior, because in learning theory, if that consequence is something the person finds pleasing or slash reinforcing, given the same antecedents, that behavior should be strengthened and should be more likely to occur. And conversely, if the consequence is something the person would seek to escape from or avoid, or in other words, it's an aversive of some sort, or if it's punishing, then given those antecedents, the behavior ought to be diminished. Now, what people lose sight of, and what is not often talked about, is that that works under some fairly extraordinary circumstances. The biggest one being you've caught it very, very early in the exhibition of the behavior. If this is a chronic behavior, the manipulation of the consequences is not going to have an impact on it. I'm just going to tell you right now, you may be able to suppress the behavior, but if you've not dealt with the unmet needs that drove it to begin with, it will be replaced by something else. And the likelihood that that'll be replaced by a proactive or a pro-social behavior is like fat and slim. They're going to get worse. The behavior that's been, quote, working for them, which again, as another side, I don't describe people's outrageous behavior as maladaptive. I describe it as hyper-adaptive. It's extremely adaptive for them. It's predictable. It accomplishes things for them. It discharges a lot of really, really rotten feelings, and it makes things happen. Watch a child if you could go to the grocery stores these days, watch a child in the checkout line in the grocery. There's a reason they put all the candy there. It's because they know parents will give in to their kids and buy that candy. And watch the first time the parent says no. And watch the child escalate to the point the parent says, all right, all right, all right. Or you get that rare parent that says, I'm really sorry, you're gonna have to restock the shelves, but we're leaving now without our groceries, and I'm taking my child home. We teach children what works on us. I can already see it in these little itty bitty munchkins, grandchildren of mine, watching them work. Me as a grandparent against their parents. If dad says no, I'll bet Papa will say yes. we'll make that work. But that's the sort of the equation we're working from. And as I said, the condition that you have to catch it early, and then whatever consequence you're using as a reinforcer or as a discourager, it has to actually serve that function for the person. And we very often miss the boat on this. I was thinking about this morning. I hadn't thought about this for a long time. As you can imagine, having traveled around the country and been at this for a long time, some of the things I've seen, and not just necessarily really early in my career, although those are some very interesting things, but even recently or later in my career. But I once went to a day treatment program, and it was where they sent all the people living in this one county in a state for their treatment of their behavioral problems. And then they went to other programs for vocational and residential, all that kind of stuff. Well, the treatment program consisted of an automated M&M dispensing system where people sat at places and they had tasks. And if they successfully completed the task or a step of the task, whatever it might be, an M&M was dispensed. Now, and what was curious to me and what I asked them about is, why are there people here that have been here for 15 years? Why haven't the M&Ms cured them? Why isn't their behavior fixed? Well, it was obvious to me, a couple things. Number one, they hadn't given any thought whatsoever to whether the task was something the person found to be interesting, motivating, whatever. It was just, here's the task we have for you, and if you want that M&M, by golly, you'll do this task. Well, you know what? If you find things for people to do that they like doing, or they're excited by, or they're challenged by, or they are rewarded by their own sense of accomplishment and mastery, or the feedback that they get from people, that they're proud of them and all that kind of stuff, you don't need M&Ms. Those things are intrinsically self-reinforcing, just as they are with us. You don't have to pay me to go ride my bike. I love riding my bike. You sometimes have to do something to get me to stop, like, hit me with a truck. Last November, that's worked for the last 11 months, by the way, to keep me off the bike. So I am very, very curious about what we choose to have people do that I believe actually serves as an antecedent. It's setting the stage for them to be distressed and upset. The second part of that is, who says everyone likes M&M? Now, I really can't imagine what sort of either neurophysical or metabolic disorder you might have to dislike M&Ms, but there you go. There are people who don't like chocolate. I have a daughter-in-law. I don't understand it at all. I don't know how that could be possible as a human being, but they never looked at whether or not that M&M was indeed reinforcing. So those are some of my basic issues with the formula. Can I have the next slide, please? So rather than spending a whole lot of time, not that there's no value in looking at antecedents, but to look at them with an eye toward what emotion is this prompting. Oh, that's right, I can't see it, because so it's probably up, right?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
I got it. Would offer to you, as again, another thing to set the stage here, is to consider antecedents instead as specific events or interactions, as again, more global. What are the things that are not happening for this person that are fairly universal? And we've overlooked them for whatever reason, or thought that they weren't essential for this person. And over the years, I've kind of divided this into these two lists. That there are issues that I believe fall in the realm of personal autonomy. And remember, all of this stuff is on a spectrum. From people who drop out of the womb and essentially announce to the world, it's going to be my way, to people who just tell me what to do. We have people that are extremely driven to be independent by disposition. And some it comes by learning and by experience. We have other people that independence frightens them. And I'm talking about people with and without disabilities. And you see this in your own life. Friends, for example, that have a more dependent relationship with their partner. And those of us who like independence, kind of makes us crazy to watch that. And yet I know that really, really works for them. So that's all on a spectrum. But the things under personal autonomy that I would have folks to think about as parents is, how much control does this child have over their lives? And what happens with whom and where? And those are kind of the three domains. What's going on, and what things do you need to make that go on? What's happening interpersonally? Who are the people in this child's life? And then where? And what do we know about this child's ability to organize themselves in different environmental settings, with different relationships, and then with different expectations and available activities, or whatever that might be. Giving children choices is a powerful, powerful thing. Sometimes when you're simply just giving them choice between yes and no. And even though there is only one right answer, you abide with them for a moment, and then you shift and you figure out a different way to ask it. And then parents, this is something I will tell you that I would not ever allow someone else to do. As a parent, it is perfectly okay at times to simply say, because I said so, because I'm the parent and I'm asserting myself as the parent right now. Now, you don't do all of that stuff, but I'm assuming that you, like I, on the threshold of becoming a parent, thinking, well, I'll tell you what, there's one thing I'm never, ever going to say to my kids is because I said so, because I'm your father. Well, yeah, it took me about 3 years, 2.5 years before one of them really misbehaved and gave me some lip, and I just, well, it's just because It's the way it is. I'm the parent, you're the child. Here's how things work in that world. But given that we have to exercise that control, giving it away is a powerful, powerful thing. It's a powerful thing as a parent. It's a powerful thing as a leader or a manager to say, I'm getting right behind you here. Trust me, I'm still steering quite a bit, but I'm right behind you and moving things along. So choices. Children, regardless of their abilities or inabilities or disabilities or capacities or competencies, again, have a need to feel that they are powerful. And little boys in particular, as soon as they get a sense of there can be a dichotomy, there is right and left and up and down and black and white and night and day, what do? They translate all of that stuff into power things. They run around with capes around their necks, and I know little girls do it too, but I see it more with the boys. And the girls, what are they doing beginning at, I don't know, age 18 months? They are figuring out their power socially. The boys are doing it more in terms of dominance and physical play and stuff. The girls, it's how do I own you? What do I have to, I believe my two little 18-month-old granddaughters own me. They know how to get exactly what they want from me because I'm willing to cede them that power, and it's enjoyable for them. Understanding the child's capacity for self-regulation. There are times that I think we expect kids to calm down or to get it together or to keep it together when they really aren't capable. That emotional temperature has now gotten to a point where they have crossed that threshold that impairs their cognitive function. So really watch and get down on the floor and teach the child ways, which includes at times teaching them ways to have temper tantrums that don't involve hurting themselves or other people. With little Isla right now, we're dealing with stuff is that when she gets mad, she bangs her head, and she bangs it hard. And then she also bangs her head for fun because she wants to see how we're gonna react to it. So she's already learned, oh my goodness, this stuff is powerful. We, on the other hand, trying to figure out, so what are those events that send her over the edge, and what can we do about them? And some of you can't do anything about them. When mama goes to work, mama goes to work. And you're mad, okay, you're mad. But you kind of have to start to get over some of the stuff. So what tools do you have to self-regulate, and what can we teach them? Whether it's a physical thing, movement, or music, or now here's another exception. I will encourage and with guidance, use timeout with parents and children and grandparents and children, nobody else. I've not seen them used well or effectively. I've tended to see them abused. This is a way to get this child out of my hair for a while if I can get them to comply with this timeout. They don't really serve as timeout is supposed to. Timeout is supposed to be a mechanism by which we remove a child from a reinforcing circumstance and situation. Well, if we're pulling them out of a fight with their brother or sister, that wasn't a reinforcing situation anyway, unless I guess they were on top, then maybe it is. The next one.
And what if timeout doesn't work?
Pardon?
And what if timeout doesn't work?
I don't expect it to be honest with you. I use timeout simply as a way to buy a little bit of time, to try to get a little bit of a window of regulation. And then I circle back after the fact to do what I believe to be the therapeutic kind of stuff. And then it really is dependent upon the age of the child, their ability to organize information about the world, their understanding of their place in that whatever framework they've organized, and the rules that they've made about this is how the world works, their age, all those things will then become huge factors. But I will tell you that it just to kind of cut to the chase of what if you have a child that is really gone? I mean, we say, oh my God, they're out of control. And they really, truly are. They're not just being mischievous and defying us or something like that. They are physically and emotionally falling apart in a million pieces. There are lots and lots of ways and times that I will teach and parents and again, grandparents, and sometimes school folks, when there's nobody around, to simply hold the child. Not as a form of restraint. Obviously, it's restraining the child, but not in a sort of face down, punitive, we're going to pin you, but in a much, much more, I am here and I will abide with you through this awful, awful thing that you're experiencing of falling apart. It's, we tend to see its impact on us. Like, oh my God, what a pain in the neck. I got to deal with this again. Oh my God, here we go. But for the child, it's sort of the end of the world. The way that
I have two like that. One of them has very low IQ, and I cannot get him at all. Any kind of discipline I give him does not work. None of it.
So, and we may get to some of it today, but all I would simply say is, what are you trying to accomplish with your discipline? And it's not working. May not actually be the right answers, the right way of describing that, but there may be things working that aren't very apparent, and unfortunately sometimes they're working against us, or they're actually strengthening the behavior in a way. But over the course of the couple sessions we got going here, hopefully I'll get to some of that for you, and if not, well, we'll have a conversation at some point. Understanding what brings a child pleasure and joy. I can't tell you the number of times that I've sat with a group of people, including the parents and people at school and stuff, and said, so what is it? What really, really floats this child's boat? And to have people not be in agreement about that, or to really not have thought a whole lot about it. We just assume that our presence and what we're extending in their lives is joyful and pleasurable. Might not be. Their definition of that might be very different. And also with kids who are very neurologically unique, their expression of that may throw us. I remember working with a young guy. I made so many mistakes with him. Went to see this. This was a 14-year-old boy, single parent mom, as is very, very, very often the case. Having a child with disability is not unlike having a child who dies. Those marriages do not survive. We're talking at almost 90% marriage failure in those instances, and it's very, very often the mom, very rarely the dad. Although now that I'm off on this track, one of the saddest nights of my career was sitting with a dad with a very, very severely multiply handicapped son, spastic quadriplegia, no idea where he was intellectually, no speech at 15, 16 years old, had to be fed, dressed, diapered, the whole kind of thing. And the dad was doing it all. At that point, he had been consistent in refusing services, and they asked me to go meet with him, thinking, well, as another dad, maybe I'd have, I don't know, credibility. So I don't know what they were thinking, and I don't know what I was thinking to agree to it. But I went and I spent an evening with this guy after he got his son to bed, and asked him a lot about, why he wouldn't accept any services, and he had his reasons, and some of them were flawed, but some were pretty accurate. But when I got around to ask, so what is your vision for the future, for your son and for you? And he said, I expect to live one day longer than Jeremy. And I said, well, yeah, I think that we all, the rules of the universe, we ought to, you're talking about defying it. Our children should not precede us and that. But yeah, I guess if you could be assured to provide his support throughout his lifespan, I guess that would be a fairly hopeful future. And he said, are you listening to me? I said, yeah, why? He said, I'm going to live one day longer. And I said, yeah, I hear that as a hopeful, wishful. He said, it's not a hopeful, wishful thing. It's the plan. And what I realized is his only vision of the future was to kill his son and kill himself. And when I asked him why, he said, because no one will ever love my son the way I do. And I said, no one ever loves anyone's children the way their parents do. But if you'll give me, oops, I just dumped my thing of water. if you'll give me a chance, I will bring in a whole bunch of people who will love him in a way that you can't, because you're his dad. And then little by little, he did, begin to allow some respite. And we never got the kid into school, but we did get him into some adult day services. And eventually, about 15 years later, we got him into a residential program. And dad started to fashion life together, which got me way off track here. So single parent mom.
Hey, Chris, actually, I wanted to interject for just a second. And I know you have a lot of slides to get through. You have 20 slides. We are currently on slide 5. We are currently on slide 5, and we have about 10 to 12 minutes left. So
all right, I'll pick up the pace here. So to cut to the chase with this child, which there's a whole bunch of aspects of this story. When he seemed to us to be most upset and distressed and would throw himself on the floor and run into walls, and he would howl over a period of, 9 months or 12 months, when we began to get a little bit of communicative stuff going with him. He was not verbal, did not have any literary skills or anything like that. He eventually was able to, in his sort of way, tell us that was when he was happiest, and simply couldn't control it or contain it. So the last autonomy thing is how much opportunity for mastery and to feel good about accomplishing things does this child have? And then the relationship stuff. I don't strive for anyone to be independent. I want people to learn to be interdependent in a way that is healthy and satisfying for, hang on one second, for all the parties. And essentially, how do you negotiate those things? Issues around safety and trust, which I see sort of like autonomy and independence. They are reverse cousins of each other. If you do things to promote interdependence, you are compromising security. If you are a helicopter parent and doing everything you can possibly do to try to keep your child safe and engage with you, you're compromising their independence and interdependence. Anyway, so the last thing, looking at communication, looking at self-esteem, their sense of belonging, and then the one that I think gets forgotten, overlooked a lot is generosity. How often do these kids have an opportunity to give something of themselves, and sometimes just something of theirs, to please someone else, as we spend a good chunk of our lives doing, and then the self-reward that comes out of that. Okay, next slide, please.
Antecedent says unmet needs.
Yeah, this is just an expansion on as unmet needs. To again, look at sensory regulation, understand that the filters of kids who are neurologically unique do not run through filters. It gets scattered all over their brains. We actually know this now from neurosciences, that a neurotypical person, if you present the same stimulus over and over and over and over again, the same part of their brain comes alive over and over and over again. If you provide the same stimulus over and over and over and over again to a child with a very unique neurology, a different part of their brain will fire up each time you do that. Now, some of those kids, there ends up being a sequence or a pattern to that. Some of them, it appears to be entirely random after thousands of trials. So we really don't know if the message sent is the message being received by the kids. So just sort of remember that. Remember, kids do things to get out of stuff, escape and avoidance. This is my way to get out of this. Sometimes they do it for attention. That's the one I hear the most. And as it turns out, it is the least in play. It just appears to be that way because they got to get our attention to get that next thing that they're really looking for. We're just the vehicle or the key to that. And then there are times that it is something tangible that the child is lacking, or the child is seeking or wanting. For example, say, oh, this child is attention seeking, let's just give them more attention. And we give them attention for 23 hours and 59 minutes. In that 1 minute window, they go and they lose it. What we end up finding out is, oh no, they only want 5 minutes of attention, but they want it from her, not from you or you or you or you or you or you. They want it from her. It's like Isla. She doesn't want attention from mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and grandma and grandpa and everybody else. She wants attention from her brother Nico because he's her older brother and he is, like the sun and the moon and everything in the universe to her. Okay, so we're finally to the first skill. We'll see how many I get through in this period of time. The first thing in putting yourself in a position to influence someone else's behavior is to understand that you wish to become a disciplinarian. Now, for me, that has some pretty heavy and negative connotations of sort of heavy-handed, autocratic, you do what I say or else. And I don't mean that at all by this. What I'm thinking about is the root word of discipline, which is disciple. And a disciple is a follower. So how is it that you become a leader that a child wishes to follow by your example, by your direction, by your guidance? Well, to do that, you have to sort of be a follower of them in a sense, in their development, their emotional maturity, all that kind of stuff. So I'll let you read through most of this. I think is probably fairly self-explanatory. Just some things to kind of keep in mind, things to say. Obviously, some of these things are more for older kids and kids obviously that are verbal. But the biggest ones that I want to kind of call attention to are three of them. One is how critical we are and being very, very careful with that. It's like everything else in the world. One bad experience and you tell 100 people, a really good experience and you tell 5 people. It's sort of the negative critical stuff that really sinks in. So be very careful with it. The flip side of that is to always be looking for an opportunity to say, I'm proud of you, good job, I see you tried hard, we'll try harder next time, I know it, whatever. And when it's an abject failure, if there is a way to at least praise the effort that they had tried, gee, I really see that you tried to, I don't know, paint the house, or my car or whatever it was. Figuring out a way to do that. And then the other piece is about teasing. Sometimes I think we think that we've got nice give and take with a child, and then we don't really get that they are perceiving it very, very differently than we are. And the way that I would just say that is that the kids are much, much, much better at teasing than they are at being teased. So let them tease you a lot more than in turn you tease them. Next slide, just very briefly. We got to make sure that people have the fundamental things that we all need in our lives physiologically. We can't survive very long without water. We can't survive very long without food. I don't think it's worth surviving without things like love and human touch and affection. Next slide. The second skill is to continually be having a conversation in your own head as well as with a partner, if you've got a partner with you, and there are other significant adults in this child's life, in trying to figure out the overlap and then the differences between what's important to this child and what's important for this child. And what I mean by that, and all of you parents will recognize this, is that there are all kinds of things we think are important for the child. We think it's important for them to go to school. We think it's important for them to have friends. We think it's important for them to dress appropriately. We think it's important, all these things, and those might all be insignificant to the child. What might be important to the child is I get as much time by myself as I can. I can't think of a great example off the top of my head, but that can create conflict when we think that what we believe to be important for the child is the child understands that that's important for them. I have a daughter who I don't believe we ever found much agreement between what I thought was important for her and what she thought was important to her. Now, despite that, what we spent a lot of time doing was negotiating the fact that we had very little overlap. Had very little common ground to build on. So what are we going to do about that? And what that ended up being is negotiating everything. There was give and take around almost everything. Now, somehow she, found her way through and found her way to a doctorate in physical therapy. But touch and go for a really long time. Who's going to influence this child because she is so single-minded and so willful. But to always have a good notion of where do you have common ground, and then retreat to it very, very frequently, particularly when things are getting a little unhinged. Then immediately drop what you're doing and go to something that's common ground. Even if the common ground is something like, oh man, I could use a peanut butter parfait right now. You want to come to Dairy Queen with me? All right, next slide, please. Very, very early in my career, I met a young man who basically laid it out to me this way. I won't, again, tell you the whole story. Is he put his hands fairly far apart. And this was after we had spent a lot of time together. I was assessing a particular aspect of his life and his behavior that was of great concern for a lot of people. And I'm slow because I gather as much information as I possibly can. But so we had an opportunity to spend a lot of time together and do a lot of stuff together. And at one point he held his hands very far apart and he said, you know what, it seems like my life, this much of it, is pretty much like yours. I want the same things you do. I want to be married. I want to have my own home. I want a family. I want a car. He wanted a new accordion. I wanted a new stereo. I wanted a new bicycle. He wanted this, he wanted that. All was the same. And he said, and then this much of my life. And he literally held his fingers about that far apart. He said, that much of my life is different. That there are things I just simply can't learn. That they are just too confounding for me. I am worried all the time. I think people are talking about me. I think people are talking about wanting to hurt me. So he had obviously an overlay of fairly severe mental illness with heavy, heavy doses of paranoia. He said, and that little part of me is different. And what do? You ignore this big part of me, from what I can tell, and you take this little piece and you slice it into smaller parts. So I have somebody who's worried about my budget. I have somebody who's worried about if I'm doing my job. I have somebody else worried about if I'm doing my laundry. I've got this person, this person, this person. And now here you are slicing off this little bizarre piece of my life. He said, so you slice me and you dice me and you call me a consumer? I'm not a consumer, I am consumed. Boom, 9 months before he would speak to me again. But what it did is set the stage for me to understand, what am I doing about this much of the person's life? And if I put as much time and energy and attention into understanding that and delivering on that, would some of this stuff be impacted? Oh, you bet it is. Now, can we change that John has a mental illness? No, or had. He's passed away. No, we could do lots of things with that around therapy and medication and other things. Can we change that John had an intellectual disability? No, but we could orchestrate or organize a lot of his life to accommodate where he did understand and could organize himself around different tasks and things. He at one point became the principal wheel builder of custom wheels for Trek bicycles. These are hand-tuned wheels that cost, hold on to your hats here, can cost $2,000 a pair for a pair of bicycle wheels. And John was the best at making sure they were absolutely true, and each one of those spokes was actually tuned to a musical tone of perfect tension. He was better than a tensometer by ear. Just incredible. A guy with mental illness and a significant intellectual disability. Because we started paying attention to this part of his life. He needed things to do that were valued by others. He needed to be regarded. He needed to have a place where he belonged, all those kind of things. Skill 3, I think I sort of covered in the introductory part. That's the antecedents, the behavior, and the analysis. I've just added in that emotional piece and then an interpretive part. The other problem I have with the ABCs is that we punctuate it. We say it starts here, ends there. That's hubris. I have more often seen our best efforts at intervention are actually the antecedent that triggers a cascade of behavior, and we don't see that or acknowledge it or understand it. So just, again, understanding sort of that little sequence of things. Make sure kids understand we say to behave or be good because they know what we mean. Very often they don't. And I've already begun this with Nico, who's 3. when his mom will say something to you, I expect you to behave yourself. And I'll sit down with him and say, what does mama mean? What does mama mean? She wants me to be good. I know. What does that mean? Being good. I know. What does that mean? It means Santa's going to bring me a bicycle. No, that's the outcome. What does she mean right now? What will being good look like? And he usually doesn't have much of an idea at all, other than I should listen and I can't hurt my sister. No, that's my expectations, because I've repeatedly told him those are the two things I'm going to get upset about and not be happy about, when you are mean or hurt your sister and when you're not being a good listener. So what he did was just gave me right back what I needed to hear. He had no idea what his mama wanted. So just be very, very clear and precise about your expectations. Talk to each other. Make sure you're on the same page. Don't get into that thing that, years down the road, you're saying, well, this isn't working, but I'm still doing it. I'm hoping one of these days that I'll get a different outcome. Very often that's actually a case of the behavior is more entrenched than we thought it was. It's been there for a longer period of time. It's just had little variations. And so we've missed that early window when we can be effective by our intervention. Okay, what's the next slide?
The quote, your quote, kids spend their lives being told by grown-ups.
Oh yeah, I already did that one. That's the, what does it mean to be
Remembering to talk, skill 4.
good? Yeah, just did that one. Make people's behavior make sense. Okay, skill 5, I'm not going to be able to get through very much of, other than to please know that we all have triggers. We all have, and that they, like everything else, are dynamic. Some of them are fairly static, that each time this happens to you, you will react to it unfavorably. The rest of it is very situational. How much sleep did you get? How are you doing with your partner? All that stuff is going to influence your ability to sort of maintain that disciplinarian, I'm worth following kind of visage. Know what yours are. Know the circumstances that set the stage for you as antecedents, so that you're now compromised with your ability to make good choices, to see the options, that sort of stuff. And then understand how your child hooks you. Children are incredibly adept, even kids with not a lot of cognitive structure, at understanding how to get us, how to draw us in, how to hold on to us, and how to push our buttons. And in fact, I would argue that some of the most skilled people in reading a room and reading the people in the room have been people who don't have any language. They are reading the nonverbal stuff, which is always more rich in information than the actual words. And they're more adept at it than we are. They walk right in the room, they know whose button to push, and boom, there they go. They zoom right in. In another session, I'll circle back and spend a little more time on this stuff. Please don't use fear. Don't do things that frighten your child, that hurt your child emotionally, to try to make a message, other than the really big stuff. So when the child is doing something that endangers themselves or endangers somebody else, that's what you save the big no for. And I literally mean that. That's when you take the child, by the shoulders and say, no. And then you give them a hug and say, you can't do that. And don't worry that giving that hug reinforces the behavior. No, it doesn't. What it reinforces is that you love them, and that you will abide with them no matter what, and you will keep them safe no matter what. To sort of wrap things up here a little bit, I have used that, because I'm going to skip skill 6 altogether, and then go to the last slide. I have used that line with Nico repeatedly. I am here to catch you. And I've used it, because he's at that age where everything is why, and then why not? So very often my answer to him when I want that to end, and I've given him all the explanation I can muster, is instead of saying because I said so or something like that, I say it is because I am here to catch you, and I will always catch you. Okay. The end is I hang around with a lot of physicists, and I had to go learn about the universe and physics and stuff. And this one book in particular resonated with me. And this was these 4 things about the rules of the universe were my takeaways. And so I figure if the whole universe is working on relationships, and of course this is relativity, not interpersonal relationships they're talking about. They're talking about Einstein's theory of relativity. If everything is about the relationship with things to others, shouldn't we be also? And shouldn't we discard our affinity for wanting to change events? I want to change the child's experience of the world. I want to change the parent's experience of the child, and the behavior will all fall in place. I don't want to change child's behavior. Parents' behavior, very often want to change. I want the child's behavior to change organically, not because I forced it or compelled it. And now I know I'm out of time now.